Today we're going to do a deep dive on Penny Dreadful Season 1, Episode 1, Night Work, and we'll do that review using the tarot cards to guide our evaluation. So today's poll is going to be a standard 3-card draw. Usually that delineates past, present, and future. For this review, I think we will use it to talk about reception at the time, the current view, and what I see for this episode as well as the season going forward. I have seen all 3 seasons of Penny Dreadful, so there's not like big surprises, but it's been far enough in my past that I don't exactly remember a beat for beat what happened either. And I really wanted to go back to the show because Penny Dreadful is a nod to 19th century cheap literature that preyed upon the public's want for something a little bit more lurid and terrifying and visceral. So I think that's like a fun kind of horror theme for us to dive into. And it's also like giving a nod to literary works in general, so a lot of public domain characters like Dracula, Mina Harker, Dorian Gray, Victor Frankenstein end up showing up, which sort of makes it perfect for a bookish channel to talk about it. So I've got the past being the 7 of bats. The present is the 8 of bats. And the future is the 6 of bats. Guys, I did all of the shuffling. I picked all across this spread. I had no idea what I was going to get, so it's really sort of hilarious to me. As you can probably tell, this is a Halloween-themed deck that I picked just for this occasion, and bats replace swords in the traditional reading. So looking at this 7 of bats, you can see we've got the thief, which is portrayed as a radish man. He's successfully stealing 7 of the bats, or the swords, and there are 2 just kind of flying off into the night and escaping his antics. The 7 of bats is supposed to expose a plan that's kind of doomed for failure as he can't successfully collect all of these swords at once, which might be describing this project more than anything going on in Penny Dreadful, but I digress. It usually shows up when we're dealing with some kind of gamble, which I guess makes sense for the original creation of the Penny Dreadful show. It was doing something that was very unique at its time, sort of focusing on these public domain characters and showing them in a new, bloody way. The show itself has a lot of nudity, even though it's not of a sexual nature, and there's a lot of like intense, bloody, sort of gruesome kind of scenes. So I can really see, even in a place like Showtime, there might have been significant risk in hosting this. And within the show Night Work, we're actually literally gathering all of our characters together to go on their first sort of like mini adventure together, test the waters for compatibility. Obviously, Sir Malcolm and Vanessa Ives are kind of bought in on saving their friend slash daughter, Mina Harker. But whether or not Chandler is going to continue to be the sharpshooter or Victor Frankenstein is going to work out as a doctor is kind of up in the air. We've sort of like tipped their curiosity. We're sort of pulling all the pieces together in this half-baked plan to save Mina Harker, but we don't have it all just one-to-one, which brings us into the 8 of bats. And here we can see that the bats have kind of wrapped this woman up and are obscuring her vision so that she can't see clearly or make any sort of specific decisions. They're also restricting her movement and giving her less options on how to move forward. As a card, this is going to sort of suggest that there's some kind of crisis incoming, something that we have to sort of like avert or work together to overcome. It's really reminding me of the scenes we get of Vanessa Ives in the open and close of the show, where she's on her knees praying to the cross, asking for God to sort of like intervene and bless her and protect her from the evil they're facing. And for me, this card's sort of pulling me back to those scenes because Victoria Ives knows she's in some kind of trouble. She knows there's some kind of supernatural divinity thing going on. And she thinks, like, if there's evil in the world, then there must be good. And if I just go ahead and pray to these good forces, surrender it all to God's hands, perhaps we'll get Mina back. Perhaps I'll be able to make it out of this okay. This card is indicating that just like us as viewers, Vanessa Ives has not seen the entirety of what's going on yet. She doesn't understand the full scope of the vampire situation, what's happened to her friend Mina, if she is even salvageable at all. And I think as these bats sort of dance around her and continue to tie her up and obscure her vision, it's kind of symbolic of the vampires within the show, because traditionally vampires can transform into bats, and it's showing like how the vampire coven is kind of leading Malcolm and Ives into this chase, which harkens back to a line that Sir Malcolm has at the end of the episode 2, where he's discussing how when he was hunting lions in Africa, there's a moment where the wind shifts and the lion looks at you and you are no longer the hunter. And that's kind of what's going on here with this card. They had a plan, they were moving forward in a very specific direction. They thought they had recently made some inroads into exactly what was going on by finding these hieroglyphics underneath the skin of one of the dead vampires. They thought they were going to get the lore. They were the ones hunting and seeking Mina. Maybe the vampires want them to be in these places at this time so that they can further whatever their own mysterious goals are. And then last but not least is going to be the future, which is the Six of Bats card. And this is sort of like very typical because we've got the pumpkin boatman steering us forward, moving us through whatever the trouble is of these bats overhead. It's sort of signaling a new journey or homecoming, which is sort of perfect for an episode 1 premiere. And it's suggesting that you know what your destination or your goal is, because we're right here on the shoreline where we can see the end destination. This card is suggesting for us that better things lie ahead, and as someone who has seen the season, this is like a very strong beginning episode, but I 100% agree that Penny Dreadful doesn't find its stride until a couple episodes in. We get a lot of promising introduction. I feel like the dialogue in the show is really strong just from the start. I think the way the characters are portrayed as mysterious with hidden depths, talking at cross purposes, all really wanting different things but coming together in this one singular moment around one singular event is like quite interesting. Plus we're sort of interweaving two stories that we know from the way they're presented are connected, but we don't know how yet. And that's going to be like the cold open with the woman who gets mutilated to pieces and whatever Malcolm and Ives are hunting. A natural conclusion here is to think it's some sort of vampire kill, but we also see Chandler on the scene observing them as they roll the body away, and he feels some sort of like disgust or concern, which suggests that maybe he knows something internally a little bit more than what he's saying. We know from what Ives has said to him that he is running from something and that he's like drowning himself in alcohol to get away from whatever that thing is, so there's that interest and pressure as well. If we choose to look at this reading as a whole from the past, present to the future as like the narrative arc of the episode, it's actually a little bit eerily accurate, because for starters we're working with swords which are element air. They're like the thinking, more erudite of the tarot card suites, which fits perfectly for this kind of review and analysis. But secondly, we can see that like we started sort of half-baked journey where we're going to go in, get these vampires, and get Mina back. This plan does not work out, and we find out there's more for us than we planned, which brings us to like the reveal of the Egyptian hieroglyphics on the one guy and starts us on this sort of forced march path, especially when we see Mina Harker and she's sort of already a little bit vampirized. And it's our first indicator too that maybe vampires here are hunting us and we're not hunting them. And that leads us to the end arc of the journey, which is like very hopeful and sort of indicates where we're going with things. We've got Frankenstein finding his monster alive. We've got Vanessa Ives and Malcolm seeing Mina, knowing there's something of her to retrieve or bring back, but not sure what it is. The only guy we've got sort of aimless right now is Chandler, but he's definitely in process of thinking it over. He is traveling different various places in London, so I think there's potential that he's also on some kind of journey, even though his destination's not quite as in sight as it is for everybody else. Overall, I think it's a super strong premiere episode. It's very clear where we're going and why we're going there. There's a lot of really gruesome moments where we're surrounded in like a cave of body parts and blood everywhere thanks to the vampire dens and also thanks to presumably vampires hunting around in this narrative. And we get a bunch of really unsettling autopsy moments. We're bringing in the British Museum Egyptologist with the hieroglyphs, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a potential blood curse explaining vampires. All of that is a little bit unique, but still very intriguing stuff. I think there's just the right amount of secrecy in between characters where each one of them is doing their own thing for their own reasons, and it happens to be like overlapping in a way that's satisfying and coming together to give you something whole. And I would say 10 years down the road, the visuals still really come up. They're disturbing and evocative and graphic. It's giving me great darker Victorian era times, so it's a little bit gothic, a little bit dark academia. Everybody's got something going on, so I want to know more about all of them and sort of am enjoying all of them as characters and their time on screen. There is a singular, obvious supernatural element, which begs the question, what else could be going on that's supernatural? And it also sort of has tied itself into science well enough that I believe it's possible we might get a scientific explanation. That's going to be all for this first episode without giving any spoilers about where we're going down the road. I really, really love this show and do want to definitely give it an episode by episode review, but let me know in the comments down below if you like this sort of like tarot card as an inspiration for how we talk about it sort of format, or if you'd like something a little bit more direct, like something that's a little bit more driven and purposeful than this. Either way, this has been a super fun experiment and I hope we can play around with more different formats in the future. And as always, keep reading.